Oh, shit.
All right.
And here we are. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a Little Dicey podcast. My name is Salvatore. This is Matthew. We are your co-hosts here and always. Real quick, we just have a couple things to get out of the way. First of all, I want to say thank you to Dale for resubscribing. We hope you're doing well, buddy. We hope Super OK is doing well. I'm going to try my best to catch a couple streams. Super busy over here on the channel with all the new changes and all that going on. But off the rip, as you can clearly see in the title, we are talking about ARTIFICERs today, as been voted on by our members of our Discord in our questions tab. So if anybody's watching right now and you're not a member of the Discord, please hop in and join. Unfortunately, we don't have the keyboard available to us because Michaela's not here to moderate the chat. But if they show up just sort of on their lonesome on their own Twitch channel, hello Diddy, shouts out to that. Maybe they can link it for you. But that's where you can find any of our, sort of voting polls for what we're going to talk about on the podcast, and just to talk to us in general and hang out as much as you want. Like I said, we just have a quick couple of announcements before we get started today. Once again, we are sponsored by Factor, which is really awesome. It's one of my favorite sort of meal prep / provider programs that you can be a part of. We have a wonderful promo code that you can see just sort of appear in chat every once in a while. So that's really cool. I believe we also have a tab on our channel. If you want to just go over to our channel tabs where you can find our like social media links and stuff like that, you'll see a link to head over to Factor and use our promo code. You can get $120 off your first 16 meals. That basically equates to you can split it up into either an order for 4 meals or 8 meals, 16 meals, or 32 meals a week. So if you just don't have time to cook ever and you're like, I need 32 meals a week.
If you're like me and you're mostly eating canned goods.
Yeah.
These days,
this might be this might be a better thing to do. Basically, Factor is a really it's a subsidiary of HelloFresh. So if you're familiar with that, it's very similar, except whereas HelloFresh sends you ingredients to make food, all portioned out perfectly, Factor is already made for you. They send you pre-made meals. All you have to do is pop it in the microwave for 2 minutes. If you don't use a microwave, just heat it till full on the stovetop, however you'd like. And you can immediately get to enjoying a prepared meal that is also calorie conscious and macronutrient conscious as well. So if you have any type of maybe dietary plan or a fitness goal or anything like that, or you just want to switch up your your dietary needs, Factor's got you covered.
Or you just want to sit next to your mom while she's eating her lean cuisine,
and just make her feel a little bit better. Yeah. Exactly. And you don't want to feel like
TV trays.
Yeah, you don't want to feel like a mid 50-year-old. So you're like, oh, I want to get Factor, so I'm like young and lean. But I highly recommend them. They're a really great meal replace. I mean, they're meals in and of themselves, but they're a great substitute and a great way to stay away from like a random sort of fast food trip. Which everybody needs every once in a while. We've all woken up on a Sunday morning, just dehydrated for reasons unknown, and you just need a McGriddle. You know what I mean?
Dude, don't say McGriddle.
Oh, we can't say that?
God, I'm hungry and horny.
Yeah, hey man, it's not Sunday morning, so you fucking relax.
Hey, we're not sponsored by McGriddles.
We're not sponsored by McGriddles, but listen, we're sponsored by Factor. But anyways, like I said, you can find our link on our channel. Through our channel tabs, and then every once in a while, one of the Discord bots, chat bots will just sort of spam that as we're going out here. So those are all of our announcements. As you can see in the title, we're talking about ARTIFICER today. Yeah. And speaking of ARTIFICERs, shouts out to Jamie. Jamie's in the chat right now. Rantasmo, what up? Good to see you, buddy.
What up?
If you're unfamiliar, here on A Little Dicey D&D, we play Dungeons & Dragons every Wednesday evening. I'm the Dungeon Master. Matt is one of the players. Jamie is also one of the players. And in a previous campaign, not the one that we're streaming actively now, Jamie was a ARTIFICER for a long time. And consistently, he was just fucking banging out on my fucking monsters, dude. He was just wrecking shop. Like
Battlesmith.
Dude, Battlesmith. Very, very powerful. But to give you an idea of sort of how we are ranking the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition classes, Matt, if you want to let them know, just sort of like, you know, how we go about doing this.
Yeah, if you haven't watched the pod the last bunch of weeks, we're doing this basically, power is gonna come into play a little bit, mostly only if the power is kind of like the thing that's limiting your fun.
Yeah.
But really what we're talking about here is how, like, when you decide to play a given class, most people want to play a given class not because they have a particular like mechanic ability, but because they want to feel like they're this class, right?
Yeah.
I want to play. So in this case, I would say, I don't want to play an Artificer. By the way, I'm going to be saying Artificer, and Sal's going to be saying Artificer, and you can tell us which one of us is an idiot.
I have no idea.
I'm gonna be playing an Artificer because I want to build robots, right? Or I want to build constructs that do my shit for me, or because I want to be really good at like inventing things or whatever. And that's sort of just like, having never read the book before, having never read what they actually do, what do I expect and hope that they do so that they'll sort of satisfy my fantasy of playing an Artificer? So that's kind of the mentality we've been using as we go through these classes. So, just as an example, not to go through them all, but like bards are incredibly powerful. But if I'm like, hey, I want to play a bard, and then I start playing a bard, in my opinion, it's not going to be what I would have expected and hoped it to be. In no way power limited. I'm going to feel effective, but it's not really what I'm expecting it to be. So that's kind of the way that we're looking at this. How well do the mechanics serve the fantasy? And
yeah, exactly.
So like we said, Jamie played an Artificer who was certainly effective in battle.
Extremely effective.
Did they feel like what Jamie expected? I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I'd be very interested, Jamie, if you're sticking around in chat, if you want to just sort of give us a quick little, like, very, very mini review, basically, over chat. Just be like, hey, yeah, I mean, I felt like an Artificer. Or were you just like, oh, I had some cool abilities and I liked how I role played the character, but I didn't, and maybe this is on me as a dungeon master, that I didn't give you enough opportunities to really feel like, what you wanted the class to feel like. But I mean, if there's definitely a huge part of it that should be baked into the game, in my opinion, which is, our entire reasoning for ranking these classes. So I'm very interested in that. But if you're busy, don't worry about it. We can. Oh, there we go. Cool.
There's an ad break, right?
Oh, an ad break. Amazing.
Hilarious. I'll give sort of my assessment of the character of Donnie as an Artificer.
Yeah, please.
I think if Donnie had been a Ranger, he would have felt almost exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, based on
because primarily they were sort of the crossbow expert sharpshooter.
Great build.
Great build. Leverage spells like levitate incredibly well in certain moments. Now, I will say, had some very fun RP moments using the Artificer stuff, which is great. Not discounting that at all. But I think like, there's a bunch of classes you could take and do a classic, archer build, and that's sort of what Jamie did. I remember. I mean, Jamie always has great RP moments, and I remember he gave
Jamie's characters are always
something
so cool.
to. I'm blanking on the name, but the guy from the Foundation at one point that was really cool, which I think he had used his sort of magical tinkerings on to sort of do something with. I don't remember the details, but the one thing that the Artificer class does really well for sure, which is kind of funny because it's not really mechanical at all, is in the text of the I built an Artificer for one shot, so that's why I'm familiar at least with the low level abilities. In the text of Artificer, it has a couple of paragraphs at least talking, like really encouraging the players to come up with creative ways to RP the spells that they cast and the things that they do in battle. And so like it might say like, hey, if you are, I mean, it doesn't say this, but it sort of is saying that like, hey, if you're playing an archer Artificer, like maybe instead of just shooting like a bow or like a regular crossbow, maybe describe your crossbow as being, sort of like cog work or steam powered,
or like that
kind of shit, cool. Right? And it talks about how like, let's say you're casting a spell and let's say you're casting this levitate spell, right? Where a wizard would just trace runes in the air and then somebody levitates. Right. The Artificer might literally have like a tiny robot crawl out of their pack and then like fucking launch them in the air, or like jetpack boots or something, right? So they really encourage you to RP things in a very Artificer way, which I think is really great because Artificer is inherently kind of, it's sort of on the line between like high fantasy and sort of, you know, cyberpunk, you know, sci-fi stuff. And so I really like that they make a point to encourage players to do this. I don't want to give too much credit to Artificer for doing that because every class can and probably should do that. Yeah. But there's definitely something where, like, most of the spellcasters can just trace runes in the air, and that feels right. Where the Artificer, it's great when, like, you know, even when I was playing my Artificer, a lot of fun on the character design was looking at all the spells I had taken and been like, how am I going to describe this spell? Right. So it really does a great job of encouraging players to RP stuff in an interesting way. That's really cool.
I really like that. However, I have a sort of counter question for you. Kind of, you alluded to it slightly. Yeah. In that description. I do believe that every class really should be encouraged to do that in some form, especially considering spellcasting is just spellcasting, right? So my question to you is, yes, that's cool. I agree. Mm-hmm. However, isn't that kind of just a cop-out?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying is, like, it doesn't look. It has nothing to do with mechanics. No. So when we're talking about translating mechanics into fulfilling the fantasy, it has nothing to do. Basically, no points.
No. Yeah, it's just.
But I think it's really smart of Wizards of the Coast, having not done this for really any other class. There's probably a blurb in the player's handbook that says, like, feel free to RP your attacks or whatever. But I just think that, like, there is something unique about Artificer that, like, no matter what else you're playing, there's nothing quite as evocative about making an attack or casting a spell as, like, an Artificer describing how, you know, a bunch of tiny robots appear. Yeah. Or, you know, like I was playing a Warforged Artificer, so I could have said, you know, my fucking chest opens and a fucking 2 guns come out. Right. Whatever. Like, I think if if they didn't do that, here's the thing. I don't want to give them too much credit for doing it, but if they had not done it,
it would be worse.
Imagine all of the players at the table playing Artificers that are just like, I cast Levitate.
It's like, are you just a wizard, dude?
Yeah,
like, I don't
know. So, like, in a lot of ways, you do have to give credit just because I think Artificers so specifically need this to happen at the table. Because otherwise they're just going to feel, and, like, even if we look at bards, even if every player playing a bard went through the trouble of every time they cast a spell to describe exactly how they're casting it, that they play a little song, or, I mean, Scanlan Shorthalt does this all the time. Sam does this all the time, right? Like, every time he casts a spell, he sang a little parody song and made the players laugh and wowed us with his stupid ass creativity. You know, and that's why Scanlan felt like a bard, not because of anything he did, but because of the way he narrated his actions.
And so, obviously, not everybody has the experience. Like, the guy originated Gavroche on Broadway in Les Mis. Yeah. Like, the dude's been working since he was fucking 8 or whatever, however the fuck old he was. You know what I mean? And he's got, like, Emmys and Grammys and shit. The guy can do it. You know what I mean? So, like, it's tough when you build a class. I mean, every episode we have to shit on the Bard. Like, I mean, Bard is F tier in our rankings specifically for this. Like, if you build a class that solely relies on, I mean, that wasn't their intention, but if you build a class and it kind of solely relies on the amount of RP that you put into it, it's like, you need to give something as a baseline. You need to have this foundational level of built-in mechanics to fantasy. Like, there has to be a certain ratio, you know what I mean? And that's sort of what we're talking all about. Now, I do want to see what Jamie wrote up for us, which is very, very kind of you, Jamie. Thank you very much, about the Artificer and sort of how he felt playing it. He played Donnie for, I want to say, maybe 3 months, something like that. Maybe, Jamie, if you want to, if you can think of how long you played it for, you played it for a while.
5 to 10 episodes, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously chat can see this, although if we do a VOD later, they won't be able to see it. So I'll just kind of read it real quick. So Jamie says, "Hey dudes, I know you're talking about." Oh yeah,
Yeah, I think it's the third paragraph.
Yeah. So build-wise, Donnie was built around getting multiple powerful attacks with a hand crossbow, which I certainly achieved, but also could have been done with basically any martial class.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Having a robot companion, right? So he was a battlesmith artificer, which means he gets a robot companion, and he gets to add intelligence to his attacks, which is
Awesome.
partly why he made why he was very good. Having a robot companion was definitely cool flavor-wise, but in practice, it often didn't fit into many smaller spaces or social situations by virtue of being flavored to be a horse. And I mean, that's just true.
That's unfortunate.
Even if it's flavored as being like a mastiff, which is sort of the original like art for it,
right?
You're still walking into a place with a giant, like with a large robot dog,
right?
It's not going to be able to go everywhere with you. Same problem, by the way. Like that's why the joke of Vexalia and Trinket, like Trinket never did shit because like Trinket wasn't allowed to go anywhere.
Yeah, and then eventually eventually Mercer gave Laura Bailey an item that allowed her to just sort of store Trinket away and then just like pop him out whenever he needed, which like as a dungeon master you kind of have to do that at some point because it's like, well, are we really gonna like deal with this the whole fucking campaign? It's like, no, like I'll give you something to help that out. So
Jamie went on to say, actually scratch my first point because my crossbow had infinite ammo, which I'd say was part of the appeal for me. Just a gun that never needs to be reloaded.
And then it was he played for quite a while. Yeah,
that's cool. Most DMs don't give a fuck about ammo though.
No, however, it's funny that you say that because it hasn't come up this campaign yet, but I've been keeping track of Garrett's arrows that he uses. So I just think it's when you have classes that aren't like Ranger or aren't like entirely devoted to long range attacks, I think as a dungeon master, unless you're playing, listen, if your game is like, the hardcore, like, Iron Man grind, like whatever, then do that for sure. But I just think that it's something that it takes too much of your attention to like actually pay attention to. If you have a class that is solely devoted to ranged weapon attacks with ammunition, but because Garrett only kind of does it every once in a while, I like the idea of like, because I know he does. I don't necessarily know if he's been paying attention, but like I modify it like on his.
Sure not.
Probably not.
That's very funny.
Right. But like I can't wait for the day where he's like, oh, I want to whatever, and I go, you reach behind you, you attempt to knock an arrow, and you realize that your quiver is empty, and then he's like, what? And I'll be like, I've been counting your arrows, buddy. You know what I mean? So it's just so funny.
That's mostly a troll, but I love it.
It's a troll. I mean, yes, but you're right.
Because then you need to figure out,
usually
like,
don't do that.
How recoverable are your arrows, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to roll to see, like, oh, you shot 10 arrows and 3 of them broke and 2 of them got lost.
Yeah, I think just I'm waiting for that to happen, and then eventually I'm gonna let. I mean, he's got the bag of holding. I'm just gonna let him, like, I'll probably have him find, like, I think there's an item called like the quiver of Elohana or some shit like that, a quiver of like whatever,
just like infinite arrows.
It's not infinite, but like you can store like an insane amount in them like at once, and then you can also store like 12 javelins in the same quiver and all this different stuff or whatever. So and then we don't have to worry about it. I'll be like, all right, just as long as like you mention like, hey, every time we go into like a town with like a something, like I'm gonna find a Fletcher, and I'll be like, okay, that's fine. I don't give a fuck. So
by the way, right at the top, Dale said, hot take, artificers better as NPCs than players. I think you're probably right, and I have a reason, which I won't say yet, but yeah. What up, Eastern East?
East.
Thanks for joining us.
What up, East? It's been a hot minute, I think. Yeah, true.
That's just saying homie.
I love saying homie.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like I'm inclusive, and also makes me feel cool as fuck.
Exactly. What up, homie?
Yeah.
So we have been trying to give kind of an initial grade before we go through abilities. Do you want to hit me with your initial artificer?
Yeah. So listen. As a dungeon master, I actually, obviously, in the same vein, I tend to agree with Dale on his assertion that generally they work better as an NPC idea. You guys have not necessarily run into an artificer proper yet in the campaign. I mean, the closest we've gotten is you've met a couple blacksmiths and an alchemist that are kind of there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you haven't met a proper one yet, mostly because the world that I'm running is not necessarily doesn't lend itself too well to the existence of artificers yet, at the very least. but I'm sure there are a few in the world. So like that's just the reason why.
And that is really true as well. Is like Artificer started as being printed in Eberron, which is a high-tech world, high-tech setting.
Right.
And they ported Artificer over as a core class with Tasha's. I mean, it's still not technically core because only Player's Handbook and
the Player's Handbook, yeah.
But they tried to sort of make it more general in Tasha's so that it can be ported into other worlds. But like, no question about it, it is the fish out of water and needs a little effort to be sort of translated.
Yeah, absolutely. And my just sort of off the rip grading is actually going to be relatively low, only because my experience as a dungeon master. Can I rate it in this matter before like we actually dive deep into it? I'm going to give it a C rating. Okay. Only because knowing that when you played, I mean, I was a player when we did that one shot when Jenna ran it, but knowing how you played your Artificer and sort of how you had to go, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had to go out of your way to like flavor everything that you were doing because these things are not built into the game for you.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I would explain instead that I think the fun of playing an Artificer is the going out of your way to RP things. That doesn't necessarily bode well for how the mechanics are doing, right? Necessarily, but yeah, that to me that's actually the most fun part of playing an Artificer. But yeah.
And I agree that's for people like us where I love being able to describe something in a more like niche way or whatever, or just a way that serves my own fantasy. But you know, I mean, for the majority, I mean, as far as I can tell, for the majority of people that play this game, if it's not on the page, they're not saying it. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, it's a disservice. In my opinion, at least. So I'm going to stick with C, especially because like Jamie said, he could have done what he did with pretty much any other class mechanically. And again, this could have been on my end as a dungeon master. Maybe I didn't give him enough opportunities. But it's really like you said, fish out of water. It's like the opportunities I would have to have kind of modified the entirety of the setting to service to really give that class the feeling like it belongs in the world. Sure. You know what I mean? And for that reason, it's difficult to give it a higher rating on my end, because if I have to bend the entire reality of what I wrote, or if you look at any of the adventure books like Curse of Strahd or Dragon Queen's Hoard or maybe with the exception of Waterdeep Heist or whatever the fuck that one's called, pretty much all of them are your classic D&D fantasy settings that don't necessarily lend themselves to this sort of steampunk-y or just at the very least like magic item based kind of character ideology, which is, I mean, that's simply on just the, how you produce the content in general. So I guess I can't blame it too much on the class itself, but when it's so much of a fish out of water situation, it's like, you could make this a little bit more specific.
Yeah, I think you can handle it in a few different ways. You can just have the Artificer be sort of like that sort of like mad cutting edge genius that everybody else is like, what the fuck are you doing? And they're like, yo, I get electricity.
I get electricity. I mean? I don't know where you're at.
You can also have, just like there's, you might have like a thieves guild or like, different sort of like tradesmen's guilds in worlds. You could have kind of like an artificer's guild and make them super, kind of uncommon, right? Not every town is going to have an artificer with a tech shop or whatever. But like, you can work around it. My initial feeling is, it's kind of in that like BC range. Since we're going to go through the abilities, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'll just give it a B initially.
Yeah, sure.
I'll give it a B initially. And I do want to preface by saying that like of all of the classes in the book that I like grew up having like sort of fantasy about, Artificer is the number one.
Nice.
Because
Very cool.
I started playing Magic the Gathering when I was fucking 8 or something in like 1994.
Yeah.
Right. I'm old people. And one of the initial, when the game first came out, there weren't a lot of like really storylines associated with it. It was just sort of generic stuff, generic fantasy stuff. But one of the first big storylines that they had with like named characters and stuff surrounded these two brothers, Urza and Mishra, who were ostensibly, not ostensibly, who were artificers.
Cool.
And so like, and I ended up reading like a huge series of books based on them and whatever, and spent a lot of time just kind of like living in that world in my own mind. And so artificers have like a special place in my heart for what how I think about them and what I would hope for them to do. So as we go through this list, I will have I'll have a strong opinion.
Hell yeah. I do want to touch on a comment from Auntie B in chat. She says that it seems like the class is pretty complicated for a beginner to play. And she asks what we think about that. And I think that it just sort of falls under the same category of, if you are a beginner, taking a full caster class, which I'm not entirely sure if this is a full caster.
Half caster.
It's a half caster. The problem is that even though this is a half caster, it does seem like there are a lot of moving parts, because a lot of the things that they deal with revolve around either items or creations that have just like walls of text on them, right? Like you have to read quite a bit to understand what you're getting with your features for Artificer. So it's not, the game does a good job of, if you're level 1, you really can't do many things anyways, right? So like if you are a true beginner, like you've never played the game before, you maybe only watched shows like ours or Critical Role or Dimension 20 or what have you, the game is great because you don't need to start at level 5, right? You start at level 1 and you've got maybe like 2 actions that you can do besides like hit someone with a sword. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, okay, like I'm now, you play that for what, 3 sessions or something like that. And hopefully at that point you're like, okay, I'm very familiar now with what I can do on my turn mechanically. Yeah. Then, eventually you level up to level 2. And guess what? Level 2, you really don't get much more than level 1.
1 or 2 extra choices.
You get 1 or 2 extra choices, and then you play that for X amount of time. Hopefully, if your dungeon master is pacing you out properly, and if you're just starting and maybe you're a dungeon master that's relatively new or you want to start a game, I highly suggest, if you're playing with all or mostly new people, take the leveling slowly. Let them get them to the point where they now have a good understanding of what they can do on their turn. Play maybe once or twice more, and then just then let them level up, right? Because you need to give them an opportunity to catch up. I found that if you level people up too quickly, then they're never going to get like a full grasp of like what they can do, and then they're going to get overwhelmed with all their choices, especially if they are a full caster. If you're a full caster, you could do fucking anything on your turn, and then you're like, well, this is too much, right? Paralysis by analysis. So
I actually think, Auntie, that Artificer there's a lot of choices. If you're playing if you're starting from 0, I'm sorry, if you're starting at a high level or even a mid level,
spike my knee. Sorry,
fucks his knee. Like Sal was saying, if you're starting from the bottom, it's really fun. It's very approachable. If you're starting from, let's say somebody just says, hey, build a level 9 Artificer or something, there are a lot of choices.
So many.
And that could be overwhelming for sure. I would say once you've made the choices, most Artificers basically play like marshals, actually.
Cool.
Which is, I believe.
Sure.
Which is certainly Battlesmith, Artillerist, and Armorer basically play like marshals. So most of the time on your turn, you're going to be like, am I going to attack or cast a spell? I don't actually think that they're as complicated to play as you might think, but to build a little bit more complicated is how I would answer
that. Sure.
Yeah.
Shouts out to Extra. Good to see you here, buddy.
Shouts out to Extra.
For sure.
Shouts out to Auntie.
Shouts out to Auntie as well.
Hell yeah.
Why don't we get into the source on D&D Beyond?
Get into it.
Once again, we're not sponsored by D&D Beyond. We use it all the time. So God damn it, D&D Beyond, if you see this and you like what we're talking about, why don't you hook us up? Why don't you give me the full access to all your source books, man? I don't want to pay for anything anymore.
Dude, you already own like
I've given them so much money, dude.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's worth it.
To the point where it's shocking if there's any bit of content that isn't isn't accessible.
That's true. I mean, well, I gotta be honest. There are a lot of monsters that I do not have access to their stat blocks, which I could just look up on Google anyways. But
all right,
whatever.
Do we want to read? How much of this early stuff do we want to read? Let's read a little bit of it, because
go for it.
Artificer is maybe, we want to know what Wizards of the Coast thinks Artificers are supposed to be. So I'm going to read this beginning, and then we'll get into the mechanics.
Sure.
Masters of invention, artificers use ingenuity and magic to unlock extraordinary capabilities in objects. They see magic as a complex system waiting to be decoded and then harnessed in their spells and inventions. You can find everything you need to play one of these artificers in the next few sections. Artificers use a variety of tools to channel their arcane power. To cast a spell, an artificer might use alchemist's supplies to create a potent elixir, calligrapher's supplies to inscribe a sigil of power, or tinker's tools to craft a temporary charm. The magic of artificers is tied to their tools and their talents, and few other characters can produce the right tool for a job as well as an artificer. Okay, so right away, I better have shit that lets me use my tools in interesting and effective ways.
Yep.
And I am unlocking extraordinary capabilities in objects.
Right.
So this is what Wizards is telling me artificers do, and I want to see this in the mechanics.
100%.
I'm pretty sure we're not going to see them in the
I'm relatively positive that's not going to be the case.
Yeah. Artificers in many worlds. This is just talking about how...
We could probably jump down to creating an
I'm going to
artificer.
skip that bit because that's just talking about how to port them in other worlds.
Yeah.
And I'm even going to skip this. This is basically just saying, like, this is the normal stuff. Like, these are going to be intelligence-based dudes.
Yeah. Our saving throws are going to be con and intelligence.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
I think Extra's been asking about multi-classing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of multi-classing, Extra, you may or may not know this, but apparently the vogue multi-class thing to do if you're playing a wizard is start with a level of artificer, to the point where, like, all the cool kids are doing it because it gets you armor proficiencies and it gets you constitution saving throws,
which is what you love.
So if you're looking for that one level dip, artificer to go wizard.
Very interesting. So if you're playing a wizard, or if you want to ultimately play a wizard and you're just sort of like, going through it, maybe you're a person who likes min-maxing or whatever, at level 1 you take artificer.
Yes.
And then at level 2 you take your wizard, and then you follow the wizard out.
Constitution saves, which is the most important save for a wizard.
Yeah.
And you get armor proficiencies from being an artificer.
Awesome.
And because I think if you take one level and a half class, does that affect your spell slot growth? I don't remember.
I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I'd have to look into it.
Obviously, you get some spell slots as first level spells, and you get like, and first level spots for a wizard are useful because you can always cast things like shield, or absorb elements, or that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the hot shit. So Extra, next time you build a wizard, if you want to be OP, start with
there you go. Start with artificer.
All right. Yeah, and so then you get the table, which we'll go through one thing at a time. But basically, these guys are half casters. So this is the first half caster we've reviewed. So the way that works is literally you get spell slots half as fast as a full spellcaster, like, Bard, Druid, Wizard, etc. And so you're going to cap out at a 5th level spell at high levels, 17th level. So you're going to be casting fewer spells at a lower level, which means that, like, with half casters, you're almost never going to be looking at damage spells, because the types of enemies you're going to be fighting at that level, your magic is like half as powerful as the other dudes. So when I think half caster, I think largely martials. The main thing you're going to be doing is attacking most of the time, but you're going to have spells to sort of, for utility, for maybe some powerful sort of buff debuff effects that aren't reliant on things like damage. But for sure, you're not going to be playing a artificer blasting shit with whatever. And artificers, I don't know if it'll say this, but artificers definitely do get healing spells, as well as sort of utility stuff. So they're sort of like bardy in that sense. They're sort of meant to have a variety of things.
Do we want to jump down to the first level feature, which is probably their baseline sort of more intimate sort of situation?
Yeah, I can keep running through features, and then you can kind of like comment on them. So like, I will just say, like I was saying, they start with Constitution saving throws, which is huge. They get a handful of skills, and they also have light armor, medium armor, shields proficiency.
Great.
So again, like, if you're thinking about the sort of decrepit old man building toys in his attic, right? Not necessarily.
Not
this
really.
Is light armor, medium armor, shields, and Constitution proficiency. So these could be pretty tough dudes on the battlefield, and I'll also just say that they get a bunch of tool proficiencies, which that makes sense.
It's great.
I should.
I can already see doing the Artificer 1 and then going into the War Mage subclass for Wizard and just being a fucking animal.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So the first level feature is very cool. This is magical tinkering. I use this all the time. And this, to me, this is sort of the Artificer's version of like a prestidigitation.
Cool.
So at first level, you learn how to invest a spark of magic into mundane objects. To use this ability, you must have, you basically use your tools, and then you touch a tiny non-magical object as an action and give it one of the following properties. It sheds bright light in a 5-foot radius and dim light for another 5 feet. Whenever tapped by a creature, the object emits a recorded message that can be heard up to 10 feet away. It can be up to 6 seconds long. It continually emits your choice of odor or nonverbal sound.
So good.
The chosen phenomenon is perceptible or perceivable up to 10 feet away, or a static visual effect appears on the object surfaces. The effect can be a picture, 25 words of text, lines, shapes, etc. The chosen property, this lasts indefinitely, and you can bestow, you can use this a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier. If you do it more than you can, then the old ones go away. So basically, this first feature is exactly what the initial description was, which is I'm going to use my tools to sort of implant a bit of magic onto an item. And this is very fun, and it's super useful. You know, it's kind of like a mini magic mouth plus mini, sort of prestidigitation.
There's minor illusion.
You do lots of fun stuff with this, and this just feels super thematic.
It's so cool.
I love this feature.
It's so cool. Yeah.
I think every class needs a feature like this, which is just fun and gives you something that is, something that is occasionally useful, but is always fun.
Oh yeah, 100%. You will always feel good using this feature. It perfectly aligns with what they want the class to be, and it is versatile enough that you will find sort of some of the niche situations as they pop up. Right?
Okay, so now we get into spellcasting. And we kind of know how spellcasting works, but I will just say that Artificer, it says tools required. You produce your Artificer spell effects through your tools. You must have a spellcasting focus, specifically Thieves' tools or some kind of artisan's tool, in hand when you cast any spell with a spellcasting feature, meaning the spell has a material component.
Right.
You must be proficient with the tool, and you are going to be.
You start off, by the way, at level 1 with 3 tool proficiencies. You get the Thieves' tool proficiencies automatically, Artisan's tools automatically, and then you get to pick one out of a laundry list of the other tools. So basically, anytime you're casting a spell that has a material component, you're instead using your tools. Yes.
If it's a costly one, I think you still do need it. But
if it's a gold cost, you need it. But that is across the board, I believe, for any class that swaps a material component for a something like an emblem or whatever.
Very true. Okay, so this is a obviously you get spell casting. I believe this is a preparation.
It is preparing, yeah.
So just like druids, you start every day with your whole list of spells that you can choose from, and you just pick which ones. That is a little bit interesting. Just because, the wizard is obviously... Well, I guess the wizard is also a preparation caster, so never mind. What is this block of text?
I think that's just a whole bunch
so
of
this is the block of text I was talking about. I won't read the whole thing because it's fairly long, but this does have... It says the magic of artifice, and it does implore you to RP your spells and abilities in very fun ways without, changing anything mechanically. Don't be limited in exactly what it says, blah, blah, blah. Okay, spell casting, that's the same as always. Okay, infuse item. So this is the sort of the main Artificer class abilities.
So this is at level 2, by the way.
This is at level 2.
Which
is sort of similar to like...
It's similar to a lot of things.
Warlock Invocations. Yeah. It's very similar to Warlock Invocations, actually.
I would say that having sort of your prime or your more focused class feature happen at level 2 is totally fine, as well as level 1 or whatever. I actually take a bit of issue with that. I'm not going to change the subject at all, really. I just want to point this out for in the future when we eventually get to Paladin. I hate that the Paladin's oath is at level 3.
It's so stupid.
It's so fucking dumb. Like, the entire basis of your class starts at level 3. Why would I ever start at level. It doesn't make any sense to me. So
Yeah.
being at level 1 or 2 is great, especially because at level 1 for the Artificer you get a really fucking cool niche ability that we just talked about, which is the magical tinkering.
Yeah. So back to Anti's question. Yes. If you're level 1 Artificer, you're gonna have a weapon, probably a sword or something, or a bow. You're gonna have a weapon. You're gonna have a 1 or 2 first level spells, and you're gonna be able to, you know, do fun little magical effects on, you know, random objects that you have. So that's not complicated.
No.
Right? And now all of a sudden you turn to level 2 and you're like, oh, now I get an infuse item ability. So, you know, no class is terribly complicated when you take it one level at a time. Okay, so infuse item. Yeah. Don't get me started on fucking
All right, yeah. We'll get there when we get there.
They're going to be the second class that's incredibly powerful that we just shit on.
I know, it's so funny. It's
anyway.
so good. And they fucking suck, but not in a cool way.
Yeah. The Dicey guys say Bards and Paladins are garbage.
Paladins, dog shit.
All right. Infuse item. At second level, you gain the ability to imbue mundane items with certain magical infusions. The magic items you create with this feature are effectively prototypes of permanent items. There's an infusions known system. So whenever you gain a level in this class, you get another infusion known. And then when you infuse, and then infusing an item. Whenever you finish a long rest, you can touch an object and imbue it with one of your infusions.
It has to be, you do have to preface this by saying it has to be a non-magical object.
It has to be a mundane item.
You can't give an already magic item, maybe that your DM has provided for you or whatever, an additional, which would be, maybe at a higher level you can do that. I don't know. That would be fucking cool.
That would be cool.
That would be tight.
And I think this is similar to the Forge Cleric as well. I think also...
Forge cannot... Yeah, so Forge has an ability where you can use your Channel of Divinity to essentially give a magic property to an item, but the magic property is simply, it is magical, and you get a +1 or something to either hitting or your AC or whatever.
You can't add a +1 to a weapon that already has +1.
No, you cannot. I don't know if that changes at a higher level, but I know I've actually made a Forge Cleric before, because I make characters all the time and see if I can want to turn them into NPCs, and that in particular I really liked.
Okay, so the infusions again remain on an item indefinitely, just like your magical tinkering. So it's consistent in flavor and mechanics. I love that. You can infuse more than one non-magical object at a time. I believe it's limited by your level or something.
Sure.
Because you definitely, and then and that's it. That's your level 2 ability.
There you go.
So we'll talk a little bit more about infusions when we get to them. It's sort of that thing where there's like a list at the end. But you know, again, this is good. So far, everything's good.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at level 3, you get your subclass called the Artificer Specialist, and you also get Right Tool for the Job, which basically lets you spend if you spend. Sorry, I'll just read it because maybe it doesn't do what I thought it did. At third level, you learn how to produce exactly the tool you need. With Thieves' Tools or Artisan's Tools, you can magically create one set of Artisan's Tools in an unoccupied space within 5 feet of you. Yeah, it takes an hour to make them.
Yeah.
So with an hour's time, basically with a short rest, you can make any tool you want.
Yep, which is great.
Okay. Very, very cool flavor.
Kind of. I'm gonna be honest. Kind of seems like that should be like a level 1 or level 2 ability, but okay, that's fine.
And sometimes you just need to splash ribbon abilities.
Sure.
And by the way, a ribbon ability, for people that don't know, is a term that is basically an ability that doesn't really do anything powerful, but it's just cool.
Yeah, it's just cool. Part of the class.
Yeah. We will talk more about that ability in a minute. And should we just talk more about that ability now? I'm going to talk more about that ability now because I don't want to have to remember to go back and talk all about all this shit. So we talked at the top, right? I'm going to lean back. Oh, yeah, he's got something to say.
That's right, baby.
So we talked at the top about how we largely are talking about flavor, how, you know, the mechanics translate to flavor. An ability like the Right Tool for the Job is really great flavor.
Yeah, great flavor.
Yo, I don't have a calligraphy kit, right? But I really need to. Daddy needs some calligraphy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to use my artisan's tools to literally make myself some calligraphy tools. Right. That's really fucking cool.
That's dope.
The problem is, if I'm a new player, and I don't have a problem with like. I don't want to be that guy that's like, oh, this individual ability isn't powerful, so that makes me shit on the whole class or whatever. So I'm not doing that. But if you're a new player especially, but even me, and you see this ability, you're like, oh, I can have any tool I want at any time. That's going to let me do so much cool shit. But WotC has done such a terrible job with having tools be useful in general. An ability like this is going to take a lot of effort from the player and the DM to ever be useful.
Right.
And when you read, when as a player you read an ability on the page and you think that sounds so cool, and then you never get to use it in an interesting way, it's so disappointing. When I built my level 5 Artificer for one shot, I had like 7 tool proficiencies. Yeah. It's just the way it works out. And it's like, I'm never going to use these because tools don't fucking do anything.
Tools don't do anything in D&D,
if it's not Thieves' tools, you basically don't do anything. So not to say you can't make this good, not to say you can't make this fun, but this is going to take DM effort to put a player in a situation where it's like, man, a viable way to get out of this is if only you could brew beer right now.
I know,
you know
right?
What I mean?
I need a brewmaster.
And then, by the way, there's no mechanics for how to brew beer.
No.
So the only thing that you'd end up doing is like, I
roll and I add my
see if I
proficiency
brew beer.
modifier. That's it.
So that's the thing is like, if you have a whole class that's sort of built on being really badass with tools and being able to make whatever they want, and tools don't do anything, I just think it sucks that WotC has not only made this class, but has now made it portable to all of the world. Sorry, I'm getting dry mouth and I forgot my water today.
You're fine.
Like, there's going to be lots of players playing Artificers now, and they're going to realize that, oh, my tools don't do anything. That sucks. So I kind of wanted to just shit on that because, like, this is a case where I'm going to say that, like, effectiveness or maybe not power in this case, but effectiveness is going to limit how I rate something, even though the flavor is great, because in practice, this ability is going to be disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it just falls under that same thing that we sort of touched on before, where it's like, this class really requires your DM to go out of their way to make you feel like you are your class.
Yeah, and not even just in a world building standpoint.
No, it's in a mechanic standpoint. You know what I mean? And that's
just to
also
jump ahead at level 6, not to interrupt you,
no, you're fine,
because it ties in.
Yeah.
Your proficiency bonus is doubled. Tool expertise. Your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check you make that uses your proficiency with a tool. So now you have 2 abilities, and by the way, that's your only level 6 ability.
So you
have to do with
you
being
might
badass
get
with tools.
You might get maybe a spell slot, maybe. I'm not sure, but
yeah, you might get a new spell.
But so does every fucking.
But so now, as
class,
you're reading your class again, you have a new player. It's like, holy shit, I'm going to be amazing with tools. I can make any tool I want, and I'm doubly good as anybody else with any tool.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, oh, when do I get to use a tool? Can I just, while the rest of your party is out like delving into a dungeon, you're like sitting at home like carving an ice sculpture, I guess.
Dude,
you know what I mean?
it's also like, I mean, the one effective tool that is ever used. There's an entire class, and then even more so beyond that, an entire subclass devoted to making you fucking amazing at using it. You don't need to be an artificer to be a thief.
Yeah.
You just play a thief rogue, and then now you could even play a fucking bard and have like an insane sleight of hand modifier or whatever, and just also be proficient in thieves tools because you took the the fucking, I don't know, criminal background or some shit like that. Like it's you can just do the one tool that is actually comes up without the DM going out of their way to like make tools relevant.
Yeah.
There are other classes that can do this just as well, if not better.
Well, that's why I'm always asking you, like, can I use my cartography proficiency in this way?
Which is great.
Because I'm trying to make that tool useful.
Yeah.
It's effectively a tool. And so I'm kind of like keeping my map as I go along and stuff. But like, this is a class that like early on, I don't know. I think it's really disappointing.
It's really tough early on, yeah.
And this is a question for you. I actually don't know how raw this is supposed to work.
Sure.
But obviously, most of the time when we see a tool used, it is a thieves tool, and that always accompanies dexterity.
Yep.
When I've used the cartography skill, I've applied wisdom because it's sort of like a survival kind of check.
Right.
If I'm an artificer and I'm using a thieves tool, would you require me to use dexterity, or would you let me use intelligence, do you think?
So that's a really good question. So raw, there's nothing that suggests that I would have to. Well, actually, so here's the thing.
Yeah.
Technically, there's no. So here's the technicality on that. There is no ability check in terms of skills. There's no skill check when you use a thieves tool.
When you use a tool,
because it's, do you have the proficiency?
Mm-hmm.
Then you do the. Oh wait, hold on. I have to think. Oh no, wait, no. I apologize. it's not a skill check, it's a tool check.
Right.
So you have to ascribe the ability to the tool.
Right.
Generally, Thieves' Tools is a sleight of hand, so dexterity, because you need to, anybody can hold a lockpick.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right? Like, Thieves' Tools is essentially, it contains a lockpick and like some other things, maybe a crowbar to break into something, whatever. But anybody could hold two locks together. But it doesn't matter how fucking smart you are if you don't have the fucking finesse of your fingers and the steady hand to do this, right?
Yeah.
You only need to know, you don't even need to be smart to be a lockpick. You just need to have the steady hand and know what a certain lock looks like, right? Or just know how to figure out that specific lock. You don't need to be smart to do that. You just need to know the lock.
Right.
So the thing is that there's no rules as written way for me to accept following the precedent set by allowing the Artificer to use their intelligence modifier for their attack, right?
Yeah, that's a subclass ability.
So that's a subclass ability.
Right.
That's a minor precedent, right?
So basically you're saying like this would have to be dex check.
It would have to be a dex check. However, if you don't have proficiency in sleight of hand, you're still going to get proficiency because you're proficient in Thieves' Tools, right? So it's going to be dexterity. So it's only going to be a matter of how high is your dexterity modifier. You're still going to get your proficiency, and eventually you're going to get double proficiency, right? So that's going to carry you pretty hard. But if you have a 20 intelligence, because that's your base ability score as an Artificer, and you're like, well, fuck, I rolled these other stats and I need my con to be high, and I've got like a 12 or whatever. It's like, all right, well, I'll put the 12 in dexterity. It's like you have a +1.
Right.
So that's kind of my point is like, so let's say you get the rogue at the table. Let's say everybody's got maxed out their primary score.
Their primaries, yeah.
So the rogue at the table is going to have a +5 for dex and probably, let's just say like a fucking +8 or something.
And they're what, like level 6 or something like that? Yeah.
So that's like a +13.
You could be, if you're a rogue and you're level 6 and you decide to go thief and you're like, I really want to be good at picking locks, you get expertise at some point.
Yeah.
And you could just pick sleight of hand.
You could get expertise in even, I think you can even take expertise in a tool if you want.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah. So, but let's say that they don't.
Okay,
let's just say that like their proficiency modifier is +4 at this point. And so let's just say that they're adding like 13 to the roll.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, because like Thieves' Tools are So let's say they're adding like 13 to the roll. So let's say you have a 14 dex, so you get +2, and then let's say you get the same +4 proficiency. So, but then you're doubling your proficiency because you have, let's say you're level 6, right? So you have this tool expertise. So you have +8. So you have 11. So I mean that's serviceable.
It's comparable.
It's good. So that's good. I wanted to make sure that at least, and by the way, I would obviously, not all DMs would, because I wouldn't. I would be tempted to let people artificers use intelligence for any tool. Reason being because in my head, I can always make the argument that if you can recall, and recollection is intelligence. If you can recall, let's say you have a photographic memory and you've read every book about lockpicking and you know exactly what this lock is and exactly the procedure to do it. Even if your hands are a little bit shakier, I feel like versus a rogue who's never fucking seen this thing in his life, but has that perfect dex, I could make the argument that I would let you use intelligence, but not everybody would. But anyway, good to know. I wanted to at least see if it was like viable, right?
I just, again, it's sort of, when it comes to that kind of stuff and there's nothing raw about it, I like to try to follow precedent. Yeah. But because, like we said, it's a subclass ability, it's like, all right, well, it's kind of difficult for me to follow precedent because the precedent set, you have to go out of your way to get. Yeah. You know what I mean? So,
and in theory, you can always do things like, I want to make again, in theory, you can always make like I want to make a survival check using dexterity, right? There is rules. There's room in the rules to do things like that where you're swapping an ability score for the right reason.
Anyway, moving on.
Damn, time is flying, dude.
I know, man.
I love talking to you guys.
I'm talking to my
boy about classes.
That's right.
It flies by fast. So we'll keep it rolling because I do want to spend more time on talking about infusions and
I mean, we can listen, man. We can just make a part 2 next week, dog.
We can just make this run a little long too.
Sure, I go fuck.
I ain't got shit to do. It's a beautiful day though.
It is very, very pretty.
Okay, so Flash of Genius. I do want to talk about this because Jamie used this a lot, and it's a
great
very
ability.
Cool ability. Starting at 7th level, you gain the ability to come up with solutions under pressure. When you or another creature you can see within 30 feet of you makes an ability check or a saving throw, you can use your reaction to add your intelligence modifier to the roll. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, and you get them all back on a long rest. So this is just like
It's a great ability.
you're going to be good at skills when necessary.
Yep.
It means that basically every skill in the game is an intelligence skill for you.
Yep.
And when you need to make that clutch saving throw, you get to add +4, +5.
Fucking
whatever.
awesome.
The thing that I'm starting to wonder though, and Jamie, I think you're still in the chat. Do you remember what Donnie's int modifier? Well, actually, this almost doesn't count because Jamie was a battlesmith.
Right.
See, so battlesmith, we're probably not going to spend much time talking about subclasses today.
I don't think so.
But battlesmith gets to add their intelligence modifier to their attacks.
Yeah.
Which means that they're sort of like a hexblade warlock in the sense that they can just absolutely focus on intelligence with basically no downside.
You don't have to worry about anything.
But if you're one of the other artificers and you're ultimately going to be making like attacks and you need to worry about your armor class, like I'm not sure that artificers can reliably he just says Donnie's int mod was 5. I thought he said Donnie's int was 5.
Donnie's int was 5. He was actually an idiot.
Yeah.
No,
I'm starting
20,
to wonder if the average artificer is really going to get to 20 intelligence if they're not a battlesmith. I don't know. But anyway, Flash Genius, awesome ability. Basically, like, having played a wizard, I always felt like intelligence as a stat was like difficult to get mileage out of. And I love this ability to like, this guy can think on his feet. And, and again, when you're an artificer, because you're really encouraged to roleplay these things, like you're making that saving throw, you can roleplay some like little fucking sensor pops out and is like, oh shit, something bad's about to happen.
Yeah.
And that gives you the advanced warning you need to prepare yourself. Like that's so fun about the artificer. All right. Magic item adept, and we'll fly through these last couple things. Magic item adept, basically you get more attunement slots,
which is
huge.
Amazing.
Huge.
It's so good.
Yeah. And artificers have one of the more interesting and ultimately more powerful capstones at level 20, which I'll talk about in a second.
That's I'm actually very excited to hear that because capstone abilities, with the exception of maybe like 2 or 3, are dog shit.
Are bad. They get a spell storing item. This is like a ring of spell storing. Incredibly powerful.
So cool.
For people that don't know, it just basically means I get to put a spell in like a ring or like a bauble or something, and then I could just give it to Sal and be like, hey, cast that whenever you want.
Yeah.
So cool.
So great. Is that limited to having to be used by a spellcasting class?
It is not.
Then amazing. It's already better than scrolls.
Yeah, this is more limited than the actual ring of spell storing, because I believe the ring of spell storing is limited to like a 4th or 5th level spell. This is actually limited to a 1st or 2nd level spell. Still very good.
Cool. Still great.
Especially
like,
because artificers aren't getting high level spells anyway.
No.
So like at level 11, you're only going to have probably 3rd level spells.
Yeah.
Okay, and then magic item savant, again, you get, so now at level 14, you can attune up to 5 magic items instead of 3. And you ignore all class, race, spell, and level requirements when attuning to a magical item. So if you've been watching the stream,
so
all of these times one of us is like, okay, I tried to attune to this, and Sal's just like, you can't, you just feel like it's not really, you can't connect to it.
You can't wrap your head around it.
It's because that motherfucker says must be attuned to by a paladin or some shit, right? Artificers, they can attune to whatever the fuck they want.
Which is, I cannot express to you how insanely good that is.
Yes.
There are reasons why there are certain magic items that can only be attuned to by certain classes, and it's not just flavor reasons. It's because that if a certain class got its hands on a certain magic item, it would be fucking nuts.
Yeah.
So,
And then at level 18, you can attune up to 6 magic items at once.
That's incredible.
So now that's double any of your other party members. And the capstone, Soul of Artifice, at 20th level. That's just a cool name, by the way.
So
Soul
cool.
of Artifice. At 20th level, you develop a mystical connection to your magic items, which you can draw on for protection. You gain a +1 bonus to all saving throws per magic item you are attuned to.
So
you have a
your
plus
slots
6.
are 6. So if you have 6 of them on you, you get +6 to every saving throw. That's amazing.
And then, if you are reduced to 0 hit points but not killed outright, you can use your reaction to end one of your infusions, which at this point you probably have, 4 or 5.
Sure.
Causing you to drop to 1 hit point instead of 0.
Amazing.
So, probably 5 times per long rest,
you can just go to 1 hit point instead of 0, and you get +6 to all your saves.
I mean,
A level 20 Artificer
that's awesome.
is legit.
In addition to that, at level 20, the magic items that you probably have gotten at that point or have access to are bonkers crazy.
Yeah.
Like, just think about, like, let's just look at it this way, right? You have 6. So at level 20, it's very likely that your DM has probably given you a legendary item. So you have at least one let's just say at least one legendary item. Most legendary items come with what are it depends. If it's like a cursed one, then you get detrimental ones, but you get like usually you get like 3 beneficial random properties on a legendary item, right? So you get those 3. That could range, it depends on what you roll, that could range from anywhere between, like, you get advantage on this type of saving throw all the time to all the way to, like, you just get +2 to your AC like all the time.
Yeah.
So there's that. You already have that, plus whatever the fucking bonkers shit crazy the legendary item thing gives you. If you have a fucking Belt of the Storm Giant, your strength's 29, whatever the fuck it is, right? So that's ridiculous. So you have that.
The crazy thing is, like, you're probably not going to okay, so everybody's attuned to 3 things, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you're in a party of 4. You're probably not going to have more than 12 insane things.
Yeah.
But what you probably are going to have is that those bracers of defense that no one can bother to attune to because they already got their other 3 things.
Right.
You're going to have that, so, like, you're going to have all those little things that are good, but they're either not cool enough or they're not quite as good as your best shit, so nobody's using. So now all of a sudden the Artificer is like, okay, I'm going to add these bracers of defense. I'm going to add that I forget what it's called, but that amulet of protection amulet of protection that gives you +1 to all your saves.
And
so
you
now,
can do a ring of defense too, which gives you +1 to all your saves again.
So now
you've got +8 to all your saves.
And that's the kind of shit that at level 20 other people probably are not attuning to.
No,
and
because
so now,
you're like, it's a waste.
Right.
I've got 3 slots.
Yeah. So now that amulet of protection is really +2 to all your saves because of the ability. The gauntlets is +2 to your AC and +1 to all your saves. Like, you are going to have.
Let me think about the math about that, right? So +6 on all your saves is on top of what you're usually getting. At level 20, you definitely have at least +5 on your you have your maxed out intelligence, and we can even say it's possible that you can have your maxed out con. So let's just hypothetically say you've got maxed out con. So you got +5. On top of that, you have +6, which is +11. If you have the 2 items now, that's +2 more on top of that. So now we're at +13. You have proficiency in Constitution. At level 20, you've got what, 7 proficiency modifier? 6. So now it's +19 to your Constitution save, and +19 to your Intelligence save.
Yeah.
When are you ever gonna fail?
So you're never gonna fail.
You're never gonna fail a con check.
You're only gonna fail concentration checks that are just absolutely brutal attacks.
Yeah, which you're probably gonna get melted.
Which is just murk you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So level 20
amazing.
That to me is an example of what a capstone ability should be.
It's so good.
It's super thematic. It actually fits in with all the other abilities, and it makes you feel fucking badass. So
do we need to bump this motherfucker up the tier list, man? I started at C tier.
Yeah. I think here's the thing. I want to touch base real quick on just a couple of examples of infusions. There's a long list. It is similar to like a Warlock Invocation. So there's a long list. Some of them have level requirements. But just as an example, Armor of Magical Strength. You would put this on a suit of armor, and now the armor, and again, this has to be mundane armor. So let's just say this is like and you have medium armor. So let's just say this is like a studded leather or whatever, right? Now the armor has 6 charges. The wearer can expend the armor's charges in the following ways. When the wearer makes a strength check or a strength saving throw, it can expend a charge to add a bonus to the roll equal to its intelligence modifier. So it makes you better at strength checks and strength saves. And if you would be knocked prone, you can use your reaction to expend a charge to avoid being knocked prone. And then the armor regains 1d6 charges daily at dawn.
Cool.
So, not crazy powerful, but cool.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of these things are. They're not crazy powerful, but they're cool. And they're kind of like plug and play. They're interchangeable, whatever. Enhanced Arcane Focus. You take a rod, staff, or wand. When holding this item, a creature gains +1 bonus to their spell attack rolls. This is really good on a blaster, especially. Enhanced defense. A creature gains a +1 bonus to armor class while wearing armor or shield infused with this item. It increases to +2 at 10th level. I know when I was playing, there was one that had a returning item. So I had a knife, basically a hand axe, that when I would throw it, it would return to me. So I didn't have to do that thing where you got to go pick up your axe or whatever, right? There's definitely things that are like +1s. And then at higher levels, like you can construct a servant. You can, this is at level 6. You can give +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls to a weapon. And then as a bonus action, you can make it shed bright light. And you can make a con save to sort of to blind people. So these things are super cool. The cool thing about being an artificer is like your party's going to love you because in theory, not that they always will, but especially when they get more of them, they're probably going to be infusing your shit too.
I mean,
right.
Well, the thing is that you have to find the balance of how many mundane objects are you going to be wearing, right? How many mundane like sets of armor or whatever, because at some point you're probably going to get a magic item that is just going to be inherently better than your mundane, studded leather with your infusion on it, right? Sure. So like at some point you're probably going to get like a really good set of studded leather armor, probably. And then it's like, all right, well, what's someone else in my party doesn't have a magic item armor set or shield or what have you. So then you want to give them an infusion, and that's just as powerful because they're a part of your party. So like if your party's stronger, then you're stronger.
Yeah, and they can also replicate magic items.
Oh, that's awesome.
So real quick, I found one that requires a level 14 prerequisite. So this one should be pretty fucking dope. Oh, it's a fucking wall of text. Basically,
coming back to what we said in the beginning, that's a slight problem to the Artificer. Yeah. It's like there are walls of text that you got to get through at some point.
So this is called Arcane Propulsion Armor.
Okay.
So you infuse this on an armor. The wearer's walking speed increases by 5 feet. The armor gets gauntlets, each of which is a magic weapon. They do 1d8 force damage, and they have the thrown property. So basically, these are got like the fucking gauntlets that just fucking
rock it out.
That's
sick.
The armor can't be removed against the wearer's will. That won't happen too often, but and then if the wearer is missing any limbs, this replaces those limbs.
Awesome.
So one thing about Eberron is this was like a post-war setting. And so there are items from Eberron that are basically like prosthetics. So cool. you have, it seems kind of weird, but like,
no, it's cool.
Yeah. So in this world, you have people who have like lost legs, lost arms in the war, and they have like magical, mechanical prosthetics. And so like somebody that maybe has lost limbs that's wearing this armor, like they're basically like a mech pilot at that point.
So cool.
But just to give you an idea of replicating items, like at level 14, they can just create Amulet of Health, Boots of Levitation, Boots of Speed, Ring of Protection. So like, hey, you don't have a Ring of Protection and you got an empty attunement slot, you just make one.
That's so cool, dude. So tight.
And just to touch base on what the subclasses are, the Alchemist is kind of the one that focuses on spell casting more. They get more spells prepared, and they get bonuses. They get bonuses on those spells, and they can make elixirs that do stuff. Yeah. The Artillerist has basically like ranged pets. The Battlesmith gets like a melee pet, basically, and then the Armorer is like fucking Iron Man.
It's fucking awesome.
So here's what I would say. I didn't say much bad about the Artificer today. I think Artificers are very cool.
Yeah.
I have two main problems with it. Is one, the tool thing. Just, Watsy, give us shit to do with our tools.
Yeah, it's
like, write actual mechanics. Give tools a function.
Yeah.
Not to say that these are the only things you can use this tool for, but fucking tell me, like, even when Sal and I were starting with Kill, I was like, what does the herbalism kit even do? What does the poisoner's kit do? These things have no text. And I know in Xanathar's they put some text in, sort of suggested, and even that text is it's incredible in compared to nothing.
Right.
But it's still fucking like,
not enough. Not enough.
The other thing that I will say about Artificer is this is a really similar problem to the tool problem, is that WotC has released two separate crafting systems, one in Xanathar's and one in the base rules. They're both kind of shitty. They're super cumbersome. It takes $1 million years and $1 million to make a paperweight.
Yeah, it's insane the amount of invested time and gold that they want you to do in game to like do these things. It makes no fucking sense.
Yeah, and this tying all the way back to the very first comment in the stream, when Dale says, "I think artificers make better NPCs than PCs." Yeah, because the NPC
have time to do shit.
Has time to do shit. When you walk up on the NPC's abode, he might have his place might be full of mechs.
Yeah,
because he's got nothing but downtime, right?
They're not adventuring,
right?
Like
and you can wave away the money, whatever.
Yeah, who gives a fuck?
Like if you're a PC, you never get to say, "Hey, DM and party, I'd like to just chill in this town for a year because I just want to spend a year crafting stuff." Like it's just probably not going to happen. And even if your party was down, you're not going to have the money.
Right?
The cost to craft stuff is insane. So when you are playing an artificer, if you go in like I would have and thought, I'm going to be inventing shit. I'm going to be the guy running the magical store. Oh, you want a wand of this?
Right.
You wanted this? Let me just make it. And you kind of can with the infusions. Mm-hmm. You kind of can. But you don't get to use your creativity when in a way that you would expect to if you're trying to play an inventor.
Right.
Artificers are not inventors. Artificers are basically melee combatants that have some spell casting and get to augment your equipment to be a little bit better and a little bit more interesting.
They're not creating something.
They're really
they are
not
augmenting
creating things.
Already existing
They're
things.
augmenting things. And I think that does not fit with any artificer that I can think of.
Sure.
In books or in media, I cannot think of somebody that I would call an artificer who you give them your sword, and they give it back to you with like some weird like rocket engine on the back that lets it return to you, right?
Right.
Like normally they're creating constructs, they're inventing things. And that's the thing that just makes it tough for me to rate artificers super high. That being said, I think artificers are really fun to play for all the reasons we talked about. All the RP reasons, I think they're really fun to play. I think that capstone makes them really effective at level 20. I mean, again, they're not breaking reality like a wizard is, but in terms of like, they're probably one of the most effective. I would think that they're pretty fucking good at melee.
They're amazing
in combat. At
they
level
have
20.
to be, right?
I think they're really fun to play. I'm probably going to land on kind of like a B.
I think I'm at B, especially after reading everything through. Yeah. I really like the choices that you're given, but like you said, just to reiterate, there are too many outside forces that are problems just in the game in general that unfortunately negatively affect the class.
Yeah.
And you know, if the class was just better, if the game was better balanced in general and like actually gave you uses for some of these things that we've had problems with, then the class would be better. But you should not have to, again, this is, we've said this about other classes that are, lower on the rankings, or we've said them about higher classes on the rankings because they do a good job about this. Yeah. You should just be able to look at the class, not look at a subclass or look at any other part of the game and go, the base parts of this class inform the fantasy, like the base mechanics of this class inform the fantasy of what this is, and you do not need to either alter the other parts of the game, whether that be your dungeon master has to go out of their way, or Wizards of the Coast needs to figure out what the fuck they're doing with some of these other things. You don't have to do that, nor do you have to go into a specific subclass to feel like this class is actually what it is.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the Artificer suffers from that, because what you do, while the mechanics do support the fantasy, what you do is not supported by the game.
Yeah, I think in a weird way, this is maybe our first example of like being limited by the core rules.
Yeah.
More than by the actual class rules. Because if there was a robust crafting system and there was a robust set of mechanics for tools, I think this might skyrocket right to S. Honestly.
In my mind,
yeah.
Right now, it's unfortunate because without all that, I kind of had this thought at the beginning, like before we were talking about, which is why I rated it C. Right now, without that stuff, this just feels like this should just be a subclass for Wizard. because you're not tinkering anything. You are there should be a subclass for wizard that is just called enchanter. And then because that's what the artificer kind of is right now.
It's funny. I had that same thought that bard should just be a wizard subclass.
Again, right. Bard should just be music wizard. It's you know what I mean? So it's kind of tough. But the things that you are actually able to do and the mechanics themselves do serve the fantasy. So I like it being middle of the road. I like it being it's not bad. It's not amazing. If only the game was a bit different, it would be incredible. Mm-hmm. It would be right up there with Druid and Warlock. But I think B is a great spot for it.
Yeah, I would love WotC to fix those holes.
Yeah,
I don't know that they will. I know that they're talking about a new set of core books, Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, coming out. I think in either 23 or 24.
Okay.
I would love to see a definitive set of rules for crafting. And real mechanics for tools. And by the way, we touched on Order of Scribes Wizard when we went through Wizard. And Order of Scribes Wizard gets an ability that basically lets them add spells to their spell book at 100th of the time,
which is amazing.
Literally 2 minutes per spell instead of an hour per spell level, right? Artificer, again, it doesn't really matter because the crafting system not only is convoluted, but there's multiple ones and there's no real which one is right.
There's no consensus, yeah.
But if Artificer just got an ability like the Scribes Wizard that just said, hey, the cost for crafting is the cost and time for crafting is a quarter of the normal one. Then suddenly crafting actually becomes viable, and your Artificer can be the guy not only just infusing your shit and getting that my DM didn't give me a bag of holding, I'll just make one.
I'll make a bag of holding.
Which, by the way, that is one of the items.
Which is great.
Which is great. But that they can make that wand that you want. That they can kind of be the member of your party who's kind of the magic store owner.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Traveling with you. And again, in a very high tech steampunk way, through RP and through flavoring. But I just think this class is let down by the core abilities, as flavorful as everything that they get is. Half of it just doesn't do anything.
Agreed.
So, but anyway, that's the Artificer, man.
Artificer's a B tier, brother.
B tier.
We'll give you the official stamp on that next episode, like we usually do at the top of every episode. If we've spoken about it in the previous episode, we'll give after taking returning to it after a week, we'll give you the hard rating on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you heard it here. You heard it here.
Even though it's a wall of text, I want to read what extra contributed here.
Sure.
An Artificer 1 Wizard 5 multiclass that produces a gun with basic bullets, and you can cast Glyph of Warding on 2 bullets with low range spells like Sleep or Animate Dead, and can with Sleep shoot someone 95 feet away. I'd have to look into if any of this is actually legit mechanically.
I know, but it sounds
the idea
awesome.
of a wizard artificer that shoots sleep bullets,
yes,
fucking you
that's
just
hilarious.
made a high tech you've made a high tech version of early man's poison tip. Dart,
yeah.
And they might fall asleep or shoot a dead body 15 feet or more away. Not have to use movement, blah blah blah. Yeah, that's hilarious.
That's
a great idea.
I love
that's
that.
The thing is artificers are so evocative. They're so cool. And by the way, if you worked with your DM and you were like, yo, I really want to play an artificer, and your DM was down to you've mostly been down when I am looking for when I have ideas to find a way to make them work. This would be a lot of work.
It would be a lot of work.
But if you have a DM that really wants to support your dreams of playing the artificer that you were born to play,
the artificer of your dreams,
and wants to help you brainstorm ways to use your tools and ways to whatever, then that'd be great. I think if they don't, though, you're probably going to be occasionally a little bit let down.
Yeah. Which again, that's why it's in the middle.
That's why it's in the middle.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Mika, since you're in chat, what up? Shouts out to you. If you wouldn't mind, before we go, if you want to just link the Discord, if anybody who's watching maybe stumbled upon us while they were browsing through Twitch or anything like that, or well, I guess it doesn't matter because when this gets uploaded to YouTube later, you won't see the chat, so who gives a fuck? But if anybody's who's lurking right now and maybe you just stumbled upon us and you like what we were talking about, or you're interested in discovering another live play Dungeons and Dragons stream, we play on this channel, Little Dicey D&D, every Wednesday evening, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a Discord, which Michaela will hopefully link relatively shortly in the chat. that you can join on this podcast. We go live every Saturday at about noon Eastern Standard Time. We talk about, well, right now we're just sort of going through every one of the 5th edition classes for Dungeons and Dragons and just sort of giving them a rating on our rating system. And you can vote for what we talk about next in the Discord. Artificer won after a call to action by, I think it was Aaron to thwart Garrett. Which was very funny. So if all goes well for next week and people want to see the Barbarian, which is what they originally voted for, this past week before the call to action was given out, well, then maybe we'll talk about Barbarian.
There's no free lunch here.
Very true.
Barbarian gets no free lunch. If y'all vote for something else, then y'all are gonna get something else.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, man, thanks for hanging out, and yeah, join the Discord and let us know, like, what do you think about Artificer? If you played one, what would you love to see?
Yeah.
What would you love to see? Like, hit us with your ideas for what you think like different tools maybe should do. You know, have you ever had a live play experience where you've been able to use those like brewer supplies or those calligraphy tools or any of that shit in like a really interesting way that actually was useful? I mean, we'd love to hear about it.
Word. Oh yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you guys later. I think the next thing that's going to be up on the channel is going to be Reroll on Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be going over the Great Nillidian Crown episode 26, I think it was. Episode 25 or 26 was whatever the most recent one is. I'm going to be there, and we're going to see how many other members of the cast we can get to talk about that episode, which was a fucking banger.
Yeah.
So
I will only be there if you guys give me some cool tool ideas.
Cool tools.
Yeah.
That's
cool
what they call. That's what they call us.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the cool tool hour, baby.
Couple of cool tools.
Hell yeah. All right, y'all. We're gonna get out of here.
I know.
Peace out.
Peace.
Transition us out of here. Fuck yeah.